Alright, so let's start at the very beginning, although this already makes it a bit difficult. If you saw my original review of this film, it was the DVD director's cut. Well, they've all been redone in HD now, which required me to use my Blu-ray version of it, which seems to be different, although I may have screwed up when I ripped it. I would admit that. I'm not going to hold that against this film. But I will have to actually say that in this case it seems to be an improvement. You see, in the original there was 3 solid minutes of absolutely nothing, just a star field flying away from you while the music played. And while I intend no disrespect to Jerry Goldsmith, there is so much of just sitting and looking at nothing in this film while music plays that after a while it just all blends together into this generic Trek tone. Nothing goes on at all, and what's worse is it's on the actual film track. You know, sometimes you get these things at the beginning. This film is rated R for violence, language, and non-consensual sex with a possum, all on different tracks. But this isn't a DVD error. It's an intentional part of the film. It's listed on the chapter menus as the overture. Now, I enjoy the classics very much, but I did not come here for a goddamn opera. And the reason I call this out on this is that after sitting there watching someone's screensaver all this time, we then finally get to the Paramount logo, and then still more of nothing going on while music plays, so we get to the opening credits, which is still more music while nothing happens for 2 minutes. The overture is supposed to establish the tone of the film before it actually starts, and 5 minutes of nothing is... Wait, what am I saying? 5 minutes of nothing absolutely sets the tone for this movie. Fortunately, the Blu-ray version cut the overture in half to a far more manageable minute and a half. So after all of this, we finally get something actually happening. And that something is Klingons flying their ships. This scene, too, goes on for a full minute of chair-gripping drama. The indescribable excitement of watching ships nonchalantly and uneventfully fly in a straight line. We finally see the Klingons, and it's still in the early days of their makeup changes, so they look like someone sewed the 2 halves of their head together. Anyway, they're exploring a blue cloud, and being Klingons, I'm sure you can imagine that the sight of a blue cloud so infuriates them that, yes, they fire a bunch of photon torpedoes into it. A nearby Starfleet base made entirely out of popsicle sticks picks up a transmission from them, and then we see the Klingon ship get vaporized. Like everything else in this movie, establishing a Starfleet base's listening takes a long time. Hell, even actually destroying the Klingons takes a long time. We are briefly introduced to Keanu Spock, who is completing the colonoscopy that removes all emotions. He gets offered a medal for being a brave boy, but declines it because he's being called to by a big blue cloud. Oh, just put that down anywhere. Logic dictates finders keepers applies. And now Kirk is introduced in San Francisco. They play the big fanfare, the music that will later get used as the theme music on The Next Generation. And get used to that. Everywhere Kirk goes, the music follows him. It gets unintentionally funny. Men, I'm going to my quarters to take a nap. Wake me when it's dinner time. So taking a break from music and special effects, we're provided the exposition that the Enterprise has undergone a major refit to help explain its big budget look. Also, even though Kirk's an admiral, he's getting the Enterprise back for this mission.
She needs more what? A shakedown.
Mr. Scott, an alien object of unbelievable destructive power is less than 3 days away from this planet. The only starship in interception range is the Enterprise.
The only ship, sir? Well, as you know, Mr. Scott, after all the ships whose crews have been wiped out, been sucked into another universe, or just been eaten, Starfleet only has 3 ships left, one of which is trying to pull the other one out of the jaws of a giant space shark. The Enterprise is our only hope. You're right, sir. Let's spend the next 4.5 minutes flying around her while smiling and not saying a word. Beige, the color of the future. Now's also a good time to talk about the uniforms that, thankfully, were limited only to this film. They were made of a special piece of material that looks absolutely unprofessional and seems to exist solely to show the size of the extras' penises. Irony time, this is the only Star Trek film to get a G rating. Sulu seems to be the only one who can pull off a uniform look this film, and that's not a gay joke. Which is also ironic, considering that only 1 out of 3 people who defended the uniforms managed to do so without using the word fag. Now's when we finally meet Enterprise's captain, Decker. Most people will know him as the dad from Seventh Heaven. Well, screw you! He is and always will be Captain Jake Cutter of Tales of the Gold Monkey, damn it! If he'd brought his one-eyed dog, it'd only make this movie better. So Kirk tells Decker that just as he finishes up the 18 months that he spent upgrading the ship, he's going to lose command and get demoted to boot. Oddly enough, Tales of the Golden Monkey got cancelled about the same time T.J. Hooker was launched, so another case of life imitating art. The transporter is one of the things that's still not working. That's why they had to beam Kirk up to the station and then fly over. They couldn't beam him over using the transporter on the station, though, because, well, that would have made sense. They beamed over to abandoned ships on numerous occasions, so I don't understand if you put people on there why there'd be a problem. I mean, we saw it in the Omega Glory when everyone was turned into rock salt, and it didn't even singe the red shirt. And really, what's the worst that can happen?
They're losing their pattern.
Oh no, they're forming.
As Geordi said, it's the safest way to travel. Except for the times it turns you into something that would make George Romero curl up and puke. Well, I hope you liked that bit, because it's arguably the best part of the movie. After that, everything gets silly again. We get what's presumably a briefing, since this is a poor time for a slumber party. A message comes in from Starfleet Popsicle Outpost 1 reporting on how huge the cloud is. Depending on the cut you're using, it's either bigger than the entire orbit of Pluto, or merely bigger than the entire orbit of the Earth. It then attacks the station, and Kirk asks for an external view. The station is slowly destroyed, as if it could be destroyed any other way, along with a guy in a suit there that's probably supposed to be really impressive, but just reminds me of one of those bendy dolls I had as a kid. The exterior view of the station soon shows nothing, which, well, I guess it means that the cloud may be a heartless killer, but nonetheless has a soft spot to spare the cameras. After that, we meet Ilea, who is so sexy, I guess, that she has to have an oath of celibacy on record. It's a little odd, and even more so the fact that she actually announces it to Kirk. I've very rarely shown up on my first date and told my boss that I don't want to screw them. And even then, it's only to explain that my leather chaps are there just because it makes me look so damn good. But as many have said, when dealing with Kirk, you may want to put that out there so he knows. It won't stop him, but he knows. We then get a message that someone's refusing to beam up, so Kirk goes down there to personally make sure they do. If you want to keep track, it's been 7 minutes since the transporter accident. It took 6 for Kirk to get from the station over to the Enterprise. You know, you may want to put a little bit more time in there if you want this to be amusingly paranoid behavior. I don't see how it's unreasonable to not want to step on the pad when the ship's science officer is being wheeled away in front of your eyes in 3 different buckets. Anyway, I suppose as we see Kirk head off, it's a good time to comment on how the updated ship is an improvement, despite overdoing the beige a little bit. They've clearly gone out of their way with all this stuff to not have that 60s era feel to it, and instead be a timeless piece that... What the hell? I'm not sure. This might be Grizzly Adams, and he seems to have the headpiece of the staff of Ra around his neck. Kirk tries to explain why he's here.
Bones is a thing out there.
Why is any object we don't understand always called a thing?
Well, Yukon Cornelius, it was either thing or big-ass station-eating cloud. Which do you prefer? Fortunately, Bones quickly gets into things and soon fully embraces the silliness of the 23rd century. And not a moment too soon, because it's time to light this baby up and take it out. Kirk's there to give Sulu all those important directions. Go! Now show me the back. Now show me the front. Now play my theme music. Look at my hand. Now look at me. I'm on a horse. But it's not all fun. They need to catch that giant cloud, so they're going to attempt the highly dangerous flying at warp inside the solar system. And this is one of those things that's best not to think about, because sometimes they can do it without a problem, and sometimes they can't do it without a problem. Well, this is the latter, because it's hard to find tension when your enemy is a cloud that eats popsicle sticks, and the most dramatic thing we've seen in the entire first 45 minutes of the film is the science officer turning into a Resident Evil critter.
But I still recommend further simulation study.
Mr. Decker, every minute brings that object closer to Earth.
You think I don't know what I'm talking about here?
Engineering, stand by for warp drive.
Captain, we need further warp simulation on the flow sensor.
Oh, just shut up and do what I tell you. So if Kirk says they're going to warp, they're going to warp. Yeah, what's the worst that can happen? Anyway, they get sucked into a wormhole and everything gets all funky, even for the 70s. And it seemed to have sucked in some kind of asteroid, too. So Kirk gets ready to blow it up with phasers. But Decker countermands with photon torpedoes, since without main power, the phasers won't work. since there's no power.
No casualties reported, Doctor.
Wrong, Mr. Chekhov. There are casualties. My wits. As in frightened out of, Captain, sir.
All right. Geez, we'll run the damn simulations if it'll shut you up. Dicker. It's Decker, sir. Sorry, Dicker. Shit rolls downhill. You're coming with me. I'm coming too. You're not invited. Hey, you should have thought of that before you hauled me up here. Kirk tries slapping Decker around, but it's kind of hard when the guy's done everything right and you've screwed up everything you've touched. Still, Kirk's no fool, and as frustrated as he is when Decker points out his inadequacies, like being groundside for so long and being unfamiliar with the new parts of the ship, his reaction is contained because he can see that Decker was right. He's still not losing his chair, though. There's a brief interruption in the scene to establish that Decker and Lieutenant Oath of Celibacy apparently had a thing going, which makes about as much sense as anything, I guess. But then we cut back to the lounge where Bones is chewing out Kirk over the situation. Bones points out that Kirk's endangering the mission because of his obsession to keep the Enterprise. Before Kirk can really respond, they're interrupted by an arriving shuttle, forcing Bones to leave Kirk alone in his room. That's definitely not dated looking at all. So we get a docking sequence. 1 minute, nothing but docking. But at least it'll deliver Spock to us. At least I'm assuming that's Spock, since it's unlikely that Dracula would be making an appearance.